Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. And may the peace, mercy, and blessings of Allah be upon you. Have you ever had a moment, or maybe even a whole season of your life, where you just felt completely, utterly abandoned?
Oh, wow. Yeah. It is an incredibly isolating place to be.
Right. I'm talking about that heavy, just sinking feeling in your chest of being spiritually dry, where you look around at your life and you wonder if you're fundamentally failing at your mission.
Yeah. And the profound thing about that specific type of pain is that it completely distorts your reality. I mean, when you're in that silence, it feels like it's never going to end.
Exactly.
And you become convinced that you are uniquely flawed to be experiencing it, like you're the only one.
You really do. You think, I must have done something irreparably wrong. But here's the incredible thing. Today's deep dive is tackling the ultimate historical, psychological, and spiritual remedy for that exact feeling.
Which is so necessary.
Because that terrifying sense of isolation, it isn't a modern invention. It's a deeply human experience. And it was actually felt in its most extreme form by the most elevated of creation.
It is a vital realization. We are going to be immersing ourselves in Surah Ad-Dhuhaa, which is chapter 93 of the Quran.
Yes.
And what makes this text so extraordinary is that it is not just a theological document outlining laws or, historical events. It is a direct, deeply personal divine intervention.
A literal intervention.
Exactly. It was revealed during the early Makkan period specifically to recalibrate the psychological state of Prophet Muhammad during a time of intense, just overwhelming distress.
Right, and our mission today is to walk with you, the listener, verse by verse, from the very first word of this chapter to the very last. We want to extract the profound life directives embedded in it.
And we have quite the dossier for this.
We really do. We've pulled together an absolute mountain of sources. We're looking at the classical heavyweights of Sunni exegesis, so scholars like Al-Tabari, Ibn Kathir, Al-Qurtubi, and Fakhr al-Din al-Razi.
The foundational giants.
Exactly. But we aren't stopping in the medieval period. We're weaving those classical insights together with modern psycho-spiritual analyses from contemporary scholars like Sayyid Qutb, Numan Ali Khan, and Omar Suleiman.
Which I think is the perfect approach because it bridges that classical theological bedrock with very real contemporary emotional applications. We're taking the timeless and figuring out exactly how it applies to your immediate reality. But to really grasp the medicine of this surah, we have to first understand the disease, right?
We need context.
We have to set the historical stage and understand the sheer emotional stakes of this moment in Makkah.
So let's paint that picture. The classical Sunni tradition identifies a specific trigger event for this revelation. It's a period known as Fatrat al-Wa'i.
Yes.
And that translates to a temporary pause or like a cessation in divine revelation.
And to really understand the weight of this, you have to imagine the prophet's reality up to this point. I mean, he has been receiving the words of the creator of the universe. He is engaged in this deeply intimate, awe-inspiring connection. And then, suddenly,
Nothing.
Complete silence. According to authentic narrations found in major collections like Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, the trigger for this specific pause was actually a physical illness.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was a brief sickness, but it was severe enough that it prevented him from standing for his night vigil prayer, the tahajjud.
And we have to pause here and think about what that actually means, because for him, missing tahajjud wasn't just missing a good habit,
Right.
like skipping a day at the gym or something.
Yeah.
In those early, brutal days in Makkah, standing in the middle of the night in prayer was his direct lifeline.
Exactly.
It was how he recharged. So he gets physically sick, he misses this vital connection for a night or two, and the revelation just stops.
The silence sets in, and almost immediately, the psychological warfare begins.
It always does.
The Quraysh, the polytheists in Makkah who had been fiercely resisting his message, they have been watching him like hawks.
Yeah.
They noticed the change.
Oh, they definitely noticed.
They noticed the silence. And they completely weaponize it against him.
The historical backdrop here is just brutal. The sources highlight one figure in particular who spearheads this Jamil.
Yes, the wife of Abu Lahab.
Right, one of the prophet's fiercest enemies. And she doesn't just mock him from afar, she approaches him directly with this dripping, venomous mockery. She literally says to him, "Oh, Muhammad, I think that your devil has finally left you."
Is a masterclass in psychological cruelty. I mean, she knows exactly where he is vulnerable. And it wasn't just her.
No.
Other idolaters started spreading rumors, propagating this vicious narrative throughout Makkah that the Lord Muhammad had abandoned him,
Wow.
that God had developed a hatred toward him. They were projecting their own hostility onto the divine.
I try to put myself in his shoes, and I can't even fathom the emotional toll. I mean, you have the external pressure of a hostile society mocking you, essentially saying, "We told you so." But the internal reaction has to be infinitely worse. The sources describe this silence inducing severe sorrow and anxiety within the prophet.
Absolutely. Because he wasn't just dealing with external haters, he was wrestling with internal terror.
Right.
He genuinely feared that he had made a catastrophic error. He thought his mission was prematurely terminated because Allah was displeased with him.
That's heartbreaking.
He felt like he had failed the ultimate assignment.
But wait, I have to jump in here because as I was going through the notes from our sources, there's a glaring discrepancy in the historical timeline.
Oh, the duration of the pause.
Yeah. You mentioned the Hadith in Bukhari says he was sick and missed his prayer for a night or two. But then you look at some of the major exegetical reports, the classical tafsir, and they claim this pause in Revelation lasted 15 days, several weeks, or maybe even up to 6 months.
It's a huge gap.
That is a massive difference. How do classical scholars reconcile a couple of nights with half a year?
It's a brilliant question, and it's one that giants like Al-Tabari and Ibn Kathir worked very carefully to harmonize. They didn't just ignore the contradiction.
Okay.
They synthesized these varying accounts by suggesting that Fatrat al-Wahy, this phenomenon of divine silence, didn't just happen once. It likely occurred on multiple overlapping occasions throughout the early Makkan period.
So it was a recurring trauma. It wasn't just a single weekend of feeling disconnected.
Precisely. The shorter pauses, the night or two mentioned in the Hadith, were the specific triggers for the immediate, visceral mockery from people like Jamil.
Right, the immediate attacks.
When he was physically sick and the revelation paused briefly, the enemies pounced. But the longer pauses, the ones stretching into weeks or months, those were what caused the deep compounding internal grief and introspection.
That makes so much sense.
Al-Tabari explains that the general atmosphere of polytheistic mockery was fueled by these various overlapping incidents of silence.
Okay. But, I mean, if God is all-powerful and all-loving, why put his beloved prophet through that? Why use silence at all?
It seems harsh, doesn't it?
It does. Doesn't that just cause unnecessary pain? What is the believer supposed to take away from this?
That is the crucial pivot. The profound takeaway here is that divine silence is not punitive. It is pedagogical.
Pedagogical, so it's a teaching tool.
Exactly. It is an educational tool designed by the Creator. Think about it. If the spiritual high was constant, the human being might become attached to the feeling of the revelation rather than the sender of the revelation. The silence builds psychological endurance. It forces the individual to rely solely upon the Creator, even in the dark.
That is a massive paradigm shift. The silence isn't a punishment, it's training. And you listening to this need to internalize that. Spiritual dryness isn't a sign that you are hated.
No.
It's a sign that you are in training. And that brings us right to the text itself. When the silence finally breaks, when the revelation resumes, Allah doesn't start with a direct answer to the mockery.
Right.
He doesn't start by addressing Jamil or telling the Makkans they are wrong. He starts with a cosmic shift in perspective.
Let's look at verses 1 and 2. By the morning brightness and by the night when it grows still.
The opening oaths. And here is where the structure gets incredibly profound. Modern scholars, specifically Numan Ali Khan, point out an absolutely fascinating structural and linguistic brilliance here.
By comparing it to the previous chapter, right?
Yes. By comparing Surah Ad-Dhuhaa with the chapter that comes right before it, Surah Al-Layl, chapter 92.
The structural mirroring and contrasting between these two consecutive chapters is a breathtaking example of Quranic linguistic precision. I mean, they're intimately linked, yet complete opposites in their focus.
Let's lay it out so the listener can visualize this. Chapter 92, Al-Layl swears by the night first and then the day. It addresses humanity generally. It talks about the varying efforts of mankind, the polytheists, the believers. It praises the righteous person who gives their wealth in charity.
Yeah.
And it ends with a promise that the righteous believer will eventually be pleased. But then you turn the page to chapter 93, Ad-Dhuhaa. It flips the entire structure on its head.
It reverses the chronology entirely. It swears by the day first, the morning brightness, and then the night.
Right.
And instead of a general audience, it speaks intimately and exclusively to the Prophet Muhammad.
Just to him.
Yes. Instead of praising the believer who gives, it declares that Allah is the one who will give limitlessly to the Prophet. And it ends not with a general promise of pleasure, but an absolute guarantee of the Prophet's ultimate personal satisfaction.
It's so cinematic. It's like the camera zooms in from a wide panning shot of all humanity in chapter 92 to a tight, intimate close-up of the Prophet's heart in chapter 93.
That's a great way to describe it.
And the oaths themselves, the cosmic phenomena being sworn by, they're tied directly to his psychological state. Let's do a deep dive into the mechanics of verse 2. And by the night when it grows still. The Arabic word used for the night settling here is saja.
The term saja is incredibly rich, and the mechanics of the word tell a story. Fakhr al-Din al-Razi, in his monumental work Tafsir al-Kabir, breaks down the root of this word. He notes that linguistic experts define saja using three converging meanings. First, sakana, which means to be calm or motionless.
Right, the stillness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Second, athlama, to be dark. And third, gata, to conceal or cover. Al-Razi likens this specific type of night to a soft garment that gently covers a resting body.
I love that imagery because it completely reframes the darkness. It's not a horror movie darkness.
No, not at all.
It's not the darkness of a storm. Sayyid Qutb expands on this beautifully in Fizilal al-Quran. He describes it not as a gloomy, oppressive night, but as a still, clear, and tranquil night covered with a light cloud of sweet longing and kind reflection.
What's fascinating here is the biological and psychological application of these oaths. The Quran is juxtaposing the intense, active light of the morning, Ad-Dhuhaa, with the quiet, concealing darkness of the settling night, Saja.
Right.
This reflects the natural biorhythms of the human soul and even our nervous systems.
Let's extend that analogy. Think about the human body. We have the sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight or flight, our active, energized state. That's the morning brightness. But if you stay in that state constantly, you burn out. You need the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest state, to recover.
Absolutely.
Imagine staring directly into the sun or living in a world where it is noon constantly, 24/7 with no shade. It would literally drive you insane. The human vessel would physically and psychologically break down.
Exactly. Continuous, relentless exposure to intense light, whether that's the literal light of the sun or the overwhelming spiritual intensity of direct divine revelation, or even just relentless, hyperproductive, socio-political activity in your own life.
Right.
It is too much for the human vessel to bear continuously. The night, which represents that pause in revelation or that emotional stillness or that feeling of spiritual dryness you might be experiencing, is biologically and spiritually required.
It's sensory deprivation for mental recovery. Modern scholars like Omar Suleiman and Yasser Qadhi really emphasize this point when they apply this to modern mental health. Periods of emotional darkness or spiritual night are not indicators that you are a failure. They are built-in mechanisms for psychological recovery. You cannot have the morning brightness without the resting period of the night.
And just as the night inevitably gives way to the morning sun, those periods of emotional stillness or depressive episodes will, by the design of the Creator, eventually be lifted by divine light.
Wow.
The natural order of the cosmos is presented as the undeniable proof of the natural order of your emotional recovery.
Okay, so the cosmos has been called as a witness. The biorhythms are validated. The stage is set. And then in verse 3, the silence is officially broken with what has to be the most powerful affirmation of divine love in the entire text.
It really is.
Verse 3, your Lord has not taken leave of you, O Muhammad, nor has he detested you.
This verse is the absolute crux of the chapter. It is the direct neutralization of Jamil's taunts and the prophet's internal fears. But to truly appreciate the depth of the comfort here, we have to look closely at the mechanics of the Arabic syntax.
Yes, because there is a grammatical miracle happening here that classical linguists marvel at.
Exactly.
The deliberate shift in the pronouns. When I first read this in the sources, it completely blew my mind. Let's break this down.
Go for it.
Allah says, ma wadda'aka, which translates to, your Lord has not forsaken you. The word for forsaken or taken leave of is wadda, and Allah attaches the pronoun you, which is the ka sound at the end, ma wadda'aka. But then we get to the second half of the sentence, wada makwala, which means, and nor does he hate or detest. The pronoun you is conspicuously missing.
It's gone.
It doesn't say wa makwala, it just says wa makwala. Why drop the pronoun?
It is dropped out of profound divine respect and tenderness. Classical linguists point out that Allah refuses to place the pronoun representing his beloved prophet adjacent to the word hate within the sentence structure.
That is amazing.
Even in a sentence actively negating the hate, even while saying, I do not hate you, God will not allow the concept of detesting and the essence of the prophet to physically touch in the grammar of the verse.
It is breathtakingly tender. Think about how we communicate with people we love in the real world. If someone is deeply insecure and you want to reassure them, you don't say, I don't find you disgusting.
Right. That still stings.
Even putting the word disgusting next to you feels harsh. You just say, I love you. The Quran executes this level of emotional intelligence at a grammatical level.
Yes.
It's an embrace in grammatical form. And notice the verse doesn't use the name Allah. It uses Rabbuka.
Right. Rabbuka translates to your sustainer, your nurturer, or your Lord.
Yeah.
It invokes the specific divine attributes of rearing and continuous, almost motherly care. The sustainer who intricately nurtured you from your very inception through every stage of your vulnerability does not arbitrarily abandon his creation halfway through the journey.
So applying this life directive directly to you, the listener, the brilliant classical scholar Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyya diagnoses a very specific disease of the human heart in his works Al-Fawaid and Madarij al-Salikin.
What does he say?
He says that despair and abandonment anxiety fundamentally stem from a lack of knowledge about who God actually is. We have this terrible cognitive distortion where we equate a delayed answer to our prayers or a difficult season in life with divine rejection.
And Ibn Qayyim calls the antidote to this distortion Husn al-Zan, which means cultivating a profoundly good opinion of Allah.
Husn al-Zan.
Yeah. When you recognize that continuous care, that rububiyyah, is an inherent, unchangeable attribute of the Creator, it prevents you from falling into the trap of thinking God hates you just because your current circumstances are dark.
So the rule is officially established for you. Circumstantial hardship, physical illness, or a lack of spiritual sweetness never, ever equates to divine wrath.
Never.
If you are breathing, your sustainer has not abandoned you. Okay, so the immediate crisis of abandonment is neutralized. But human anxiety doesn't just stop at the present moment, right?
Of course not. It projects forward.
Exactly. It immediately projects into the future. If I'm safe now, will I be safe tomorrow? Does it actually get better? Or am I just going to be surviving this baseline forever? And that leads perfectly into the teleological horizon of verses 4 and 5. How does the text secure the future?
Well, let's look at verse 4.
Huh.
And the hereafter is better for you than the first life. The Arabic terms here are al-akhirah and alula.
Okay.
And our sources show that there's a dual prophecy happening here, operating simultaneously on two completely different timelines.
Let's unpack the first timeline, the ultimate one.
The traditional eschatological interpretation, which is heavily emphasized by scholars like Ibn Kathir, views al-akhirah as Jannah, paradise, and alula as the dunya, the present worldly life.
The standard understanding, yeah.
Exactly. And this specific understanding fueled the prophet's intense zud.
Let's define zud for a second, because that's a term that gets thrown around a lot. It usually gets translated as asceticism, but it's not just about hating worldly things or being miserable, is it?
Not at all.
It's about knowing the actual market value of this world compared to the hereafter.
Exactly. Zud is detachment rooted in perspective. The prophet knew with absolute certainty that the next life was infinitely superior, so he maintained a profound detachment from accumulating worldly wealth. The sources mention that at the very end of his life, he was actually given a choice by Allah. He could remain in this world forever as an immortal king, or he could move on to the company of his Lord.
Wow.
And because of the promise embedded in this very verse, he unhesitatingly chose the latter.
But there's a second layer to this prophecy, right? A temporal layer that applies to his life on earth.
Yes. Al-Tabari and later contemporary scholars like Sayyid Qutb and Numan Ali Khan expand on the linguistic roots of these words. Linguistically, al-akhirah simply implies what comes later, and al-ula implies what came first.
Okay, so chronologically.
Right. So, historically, God is making a promise to the prophet in the midst of his darkest hour. Every subsequent phase of your mission, every single tomorrow, will be superior, more established, and more victorious than your yesterday.
You are at the absolute lowest point right now in Makkah, being mocked by Jamil. But what comes later, the migration to Medina, the opening of Makkah, the global spread of the message, will be infinitely better.
Exactly.
And for the listener, this is the anchor of unshakable optimism. Omar Suleiman highlights that having the conviction that the latter is better than the former is critical for surviving trauma. It tells you your trajectory is inherently upward, even if there are dips along the way.
And we need to be very careful here. We shouldn't think this means we're just supposed to be miserable now,
Right.
quietly suffering, waiting to die so we can finally be happy in the afterlife. The classical giant Ibn Taymiyyah famously posited a beautiful concept. He said, "Verily, there is a paradise in this world, and whoever does not enter it now will not enter the paradise of the hereafter."
I have always loved that quote. What is the paradise in this world? It is the intimate knowledge, reliance, and remembrance of Allah. If you carry that internal paradise with you, you can survive any temporal suffering because your internal state is secure and you know what's coming next. And what exactly is coming next? Verse 5 gives the ultimate guarantee, and your Lord is going to give you, and you will be satisfied.
Once again, the linguistic nuance here is staggering, and it's all in the mechanics of the verbs. The verb used for giving is utika, which comes from the root atada.
Okay.
This specific word signifies giving a gift freely, with full rights, and without any expectation of return, condition, or burden. It is a limitless bestowal.
As opposed to another word for giving in Arabic, ata, which the sources point out implies giving something that comes with a heavy responsibility or burden attached to it,
Right.
like a kingdom or a massive political task. Allah isn't giving him another burden to carry. He is giving him a free, limitless gift.
And notice what is missing from the verse. He doesn't specify what the gift is.
The object is blank.
The object to the verb is left entirely open. The classical exegetes like Al-Qurtubi and Al-Jalain list many eschatological gifts that fit this promise, like the river of Al-Kauthar in paradise, which features domes of hollowed pearls, or the Maqam al-Mahmud, the praiseworthy station on the Day of Judgment.
Incredible.
But by leaving it open, Allah simply promises a continuous, unending flow of bestowals until the prophet reaches a state of absolute emotional and spiritual satisfaction. The Arabic word is fatarda.
And this brings us to what I think is one of the most profoundly moving parts of the entire Sorts dossier. Orthodox Sunni theology interprets this specific verse as the ultimate scriptural proof of the grand intercession, or shafa.
Yes.
Al-Qurtubi cites a renowned and authentic narration regarding the prophet's immediate reaction when this specific verse was revealed.
It's a defining moment. When Allah promised, "I will give to you until you are satisfied," the Prophet Muhammad responded by declaring that he would not be satisfied as long as a single member of his ummah, his community of followers, remained in the hellfire.
Let's just sit with the mechanics of that for a second. The creator of the universe hands him a blank check. I will give you whatever you want until you are happy. And his ultimate satisfaction isn't found in personal elevation. It's not found in hollowed pearls or massive palaces or eternal relaxation. His satisfaction is inextricably tied to your salvation,
Wow.
to the salvation of the person listening to this right now. He refuses to be fully satisfied until his people are safe.
This completely redefines the metric of success. As Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali notes, true wealth in the Islamic paradigm is gina an-nafs, the richness and contentment of the soul.
The richness of the soul.
And the Prophet's reaction sets the ultimate blueprint for compassionate leadership. You find your ultimate satisfaction not in what you can accumulate for yourself, but in how you can secure the welfare, the safety, and the salvation of the people you're responsible for.
Okay, so the promises of the future have been laid out. The hereafter is better, and you will be given until you are satisfied. But let's be realistic. If you're the prophet sitting in the darkness and hostility of Makkah, or if you're a listener right now paralyzed by very real present anxiety, how do you logically solidify a promise about the future? How do you make your anxious heart actually believe it? Words are great, but the human mind demands proof.
This is where the Quran executes a brilliant rhetorical shift. To guarantee a promise about the future, you have to force a reflection on the past.
Okay.
You map out the historical evidence of divine providence. You essentially say, look at your own track record.
The retrospective proofs. In verses 6 through 8, Allah lists 3 profound, undeniable historical interventions in the prophet's life. He maps the ultimate human vulnerabilities against the perfect divine rescues.
Let's go through them.
Number 1, verse 6. Did he not find you an orphan and give you refuge?
The Arabic maps yatiman to awawa. To be an orphan in a 7th century tribal Arabian society was not just a sadness. It was a state of utter social, economic, and physical vulnerability. You lacked the patriarchal protection necessary to simply survive in a brutal environment.
You were defenseless.
Yet, Allah provided awa, shelter and refuge. He provided it first through his grandfather, Abu al-Muttalib, then his uncle Abu Talib, and ultimately on a macro scale through the Ansar, the helpers of Medina.
He was entirely helpless and he was protected. Number 2, verse 8. We're going to skip to 8 for a second before tackling the massive controversy in 7.
Good idea.
Verse 8 says, "And he found you in need and made you self-sufficient."
This maps Elan to Agna. The prophet experienced severe financial destitution early in his life and carried heavy familial responsibilities. He was Elan, impoverished.
Right.
But Allah enriched him, Agna, making him self-sufficient. This happened materially through the wealth of his wife Khadijah and success in his trade, but more importantly, it happened through that profound spiritual richness of internal contentment we just discussed. He was given enough so that he never had to rely on the people who were currently mocking him.
Okay, now we have to tackle verse 7. Because this is where the classical sources get incredibly intense, and I have to admit, when I first read this, it stopped me in my tracks.
The heavy one.
Verse 7. "And he found you lost and guided you." The Arabic word used for lost here is dalin.
Yes.
Hold on a second. Dalin, you're telling me the text calls an infallible prophet lost or misguided. That completely shatters the foundational rules of Sunni theology we just talked about.
It seems like a massive contradiction at first glance.
Prophets are supposed to possess isma, divine infallibility, meaning they are divinely protected from major sins and polytheism even before their official prophethood begins. So how do classical scholars not absolutely panic over this word?
Oh, they took it incredibly seriously. This is perhaps the most rigorously debated lexical item in classical Sunni exegesis.
I can imagine.
And because of the theological stakes, we have to look at this impartially, exactly as the tradition presents the debate. Our sources map out several distinct, fierce, scholarly perspectives trying to resolve this paradox.
Let's lay out the perspectives. First, we have what we can call the rationalist, or theological defense, championed by Fakhr al-Din al-Razi and the formidable hadith scholar al-Dhahabi.
Yes. In Tafsir al-Kabir, al-Razi catalogs over 20 different interpretations specifically to safeguard the prophet's infallibility. He notes that some early, highly controversial commentators like al-Kalbi and al-Sudi suggested Dalan meant the prophet literally lived upon the religion of his people.
Wait, meaning he participated in disbelief or idolatry for 40 years before Revelation?
Yes, that was their suggestion.
What was the reaction from the mainstream scholars to that?
Violent, absolute rejection. Al-Razi and al-Dhahabi strictly and fiercely reject this view, classifying it as a severe theological error that violates the consensus of Orthodox theology.
Okay, that makes sense.
Al-Dhahabi, in his biographical masterpiece Siyar al-Nubala, continually emphasizes the absolute purity of the prophetic lineage and intellect from day one. He argues that the prophet's innate disposition, his fitra, was perfectly preserved. He never bowed to an idol.
Okay, that makes sense doctrinally. But if it doesn't mean idolatry, what is the mainstream consensus? How do they translate Dalan?
The dominant view, held by titans like Ibn Kathir, al-Tabari, and al-Qurtubi, translates Dalan contextually as unaware or unknowing.
Unaware.
And they don't just guess this. They use intertextuality, using the Quran to explain the Quran to prove it. They point to Surah Ashura, verse 52, where Allah says to the prophet, "You did not know what is the book or what is faith." So the argument is that he wasn't committing sin. He was simply unguided regarding the specific detailed laws in Scripture until Allah bestowed the Quran upon him.
But wait, if he's unguided regarding the law, doesn't that still imply a period where he was practicing something else? How do scholars draw the line between being unaware and being astray in a polytheistic society?
They argue that his unawareness meant he practiced a generalized monotheism, the remnants of the religion of Abraham, but he didn't know the specifics of how to pray, how to fast, or the intricate details of the unseen.
Oh, he was lost in the sense of lacking the manual, not lost in the sense of moral corruption.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Lost regarding the specifics of the law. But then there's a third view from modern scholars like Sayyid Qutb and Numan Ali Khan, which I find incredibly relatable. We can call it the seeker's view.
This view analyzes Dalan as a state of intense spiritual seeking and existential bewilderment. Think about the environment. The prophet was living in Makkah, a society completely plagued by moral decay, rampant capitalism, infanticide, and idol worship. He was profoundly disgusted by it.
He used to retreat to the cave, right?
Exactly. He would retreat to the cave of Hira just to escape the noise and seek the ultimate truth. Allah found him searching, lost in his desperate quest for reality, wandering in his thoughts, and provided the ultimate guidance, Hada.
I really resonate with that. It's the bewilderment of someone who knows society is wrong but doesn't yet have the divine roadmap to fix it. And just to cover all bases, there is a fourth, very literal historical interpretation mentioned in the classical accounts, right? Yes, the literal view is that he physically wandered off and became lost in the valleys of Makra as a small child, and Allah miraculously guided him back safely to his grandfather or his wet nurse.
Regardless of which interpretation you lean toward, whether he was unaware of the law, bewildered by society, or literally lost in a valley, the rhetorical function of these three verses is identical.
Absolutely.
God is providing a holistic framework for human flourishing. He provided physical safety from orphanhood, intellectual and spiritual clarity from confusion, and material sustenance from poverty.
Precisely. And if we ground this heavy theology back to your daily life, the listener, we see the profound therapeutic value of retrospection.
Yeah.
Omar Suleiman outlines this brilliantly. When you're paralyzed by anxiety about the future, you have to engage in historical mapping.
What does that look like practically?
It means you actively map your past survivals against your current fears. You sit down and look at your track record. If he saved you when you were completely helpless, an infant, utterly vulnerable, why would he abandon you now when you were an adult actively striving toward him?
Wow.
Acknowledging your past rescues is the psychological mechanism that guarantees your future resilience.
It's proof of concept. God has saved you before. He will save you again. And that realization leads to a massive pivot in the surah. We've spent 8 verses talking entirely about what Allah has done for the Prophet. The affirmation of love, the promise of the glorious future, the historical proofs of the past. But in the final 3 verses, the focus violently shifts. It moves entirely from what Allah has done for you to what you must now do for society.
This is where theology becomes sociology. Verses 9 through 11 lay out the ethical imperatives. So as for the orphan, do not oppress him. And as for the petitioner, do not repel him. But as for the favor of your Lord, report it.
The linguistic correlation here is a masterpiece of divine logic. The commands given here directly correspond to the vulnerabilities we just discussed.
Exactly.
Because you were an orphan, Yatiman, you are strictly commanded not to oppress the orphan, Takar. Because you were once poor and searching, Dalan and Elan, you are forbidden from repulsing the petitioner, Tanhar.
Let's zoom in on that word petitioner. The Arabic is Sa'il. Who exactly is the Sai? There's a fascinating jurisprudential consensus here, highlighted by scholars like al-Qurtubi and al-Razi.
Okay.
The Sai has a dual facet. On one hand, it refers to a literal beggar seeking financial assistance. On the other hand, it applies equally to a student or a questioner seeking academic or religious knowledge.
So someone asking for your money and someone asking for your time and wisdom.
Exactly. And the classical scholars emphasize that to repel either type of sa'il with arrogance or harshness is a direct, egregious violation of the gratitude you owe to Allah for your own wealth and your own guidance.
That's a huge responsibility.
It is. Say Qudwana views these verses as the immutable blueprint for an equitable society. It's a systemic rejection of the greedy, exploitative systems of Jahiliyyah, the age of ignorance before Islam. Leaders must govern with profound empathy, using their own past trauma as the catalyst to protect the marginalized today.
It's what we might call the exalted etiquette of refusal. Because realistically, you can't help everyone.
Sure.
But even if you don't have $1 to give the beggar, or you don't know the answer to the student's question, the Quranic mandate is that you cannot be harsh. You cannot physically or verbally repel them. You must preserve the dignity of the vulnerable at all costs.
Absolutely.
And then we hit the final verse, verse 11. But as for the favor of your Lord, report it. The Arabic word is fahadith. Speak about it.
In the Islamic worldview, gratitude, shukr, is not just a warm, fuzzy internal feeling you keep to yourself. It is an active verbal and societal obligation. Al-Qurtubi and Ibn Kathir cite a vital prophetic hadith here. Whoever is not thankful to the people, then he is not thankful to Allah. And another narration from Abu Dawood says, whoever overcomes some test and mentions it to others, then he is indeed thankful. And whoever conceals it, then indeed he was ungrateful.
So it's active proclamation. If the greatest favor you received was guidance, then reporting the favor means sharing that knowledge, doing dawah, and verbally acknowledging God's grace in your life without arrogance. You don't hide the fact that you were saved.
If we synthesize all of this, the cosmic oaths, the psychological reassurances, the historical mapping, and the ethical commands in verses 9, 10, and 11, we arrive at what modern scholars like Yasir Qadhi and Omar Suleiman call the Dhuhaa approach to mental health. It is a 4-step, Quranically aligned methodology to treat trauma and destigmatize depression.
Let's lay out these 4 steps of the Duha approach clearly for the listener, because this is the actionable framework we promised at the start. Step 1, validation of pain. You have to acknowledge the night. You have to validate the reality of your emotional void and recognize that sadness or spiritual dryness does not equal weak faith. The prophet felt it. You will feel it.
Step 2, cognitive restructuring. This sounds clinical, but it's deeply spiritual. You must break the cognitive distortion of divine abandonment. You actively remember Ma Wara'aka, he has not forsaken you.
Right.
You cultivate Huzn al-Zan, that profoundly good opinion of the Creator's continuous care.
Step 3, historical mapping. You actively engage in retrospection. You map the times you were previously saved against your current anxiety. You look at your own history as the undeniable proof to guarantee your future resilience.
And finally, step 4, which is perhaps the most critical counterintuitive cure, behavioral activation through altruism.
This is where it all comes together. When you are depressed, the natural human instinct is to isolate, to pull inward, to focus entirely on your own pain.
Which is natural.
It is. But Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali stresses that true gratitude requires outward action. He says that relieving the hardship of another believer, like the orphan or the beggar we just talked about, guarantees that Allah will relieve a hardship for you on the day of resurrection.
This is the ultimate therapy. By shifting your focus from your own internal trauma to external service, you physically and psychologically break the cycle of depressive self-absorption.
Wow.
You turn your blessings and even the lessons learned from your trauma into service for others. Giving to others is the ultimate tangible manifestation of receiving from God.
Okay, let's bring this all home. We have journeyed from the stillness of the night to the brilliance of the morning. We've seen how Surah Ad-Dhuhaa, from the first verse to the last, is a masterclass in divine psychology.
It truly is.
It takes the deeply human experience of despair, completely validates it, and then radically redefines what success actually looks like. Success isn't material accumulation or a life completely free of pain. It's the richness of the soul. It's the pursuit of the hereafter, and carrying the intimate knowledge of the sustainer with you in this life.
And crucially, it establishes an undeniable moral law. The reception of grace mandates the distribution of grace. You cannot hoard the physical wealth or the emotional comfort or the spiritual guidance God gives you.
It has to manifest.
It has to manifest in the real world. It has to show in how fiercely you protect the orphan, how you dignify the beggar, how patiently you mentor the seeker, and how openly you proclaim your gratitude.
It is a complete paradigm for living. But before we go, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over.
Yeah.
We spent a lot of time today talking about the night, the saja, that still dark, concealing garment that represents our periods of sadness, our delayed prayers, and our spiritual dryness. We know now that it's a phase designed specifically by the Creator for our rest and consolidation, to prepare our nervous systems and our souls to handle the intense light of the morning. So ask yourself, what vital lessons, what necessary emotional healing, or what hidden strength are you currently ignoring because you are rushing so desperately to escape your own darkness?
That is the ultimate question. The night isn't your enemy, it's your preparation.
Jazakallah khair. May Allah reward you with goodness for spending your valuable time listening to us.